your video just being audio. Yeah, got it. All right, we are live here on YouTube. We are live here on June 28th. It is June 28th, 2025. Of course, everybody, we have another very special presentation for you today. The one and only Gary Wayne from Genesis6Conspiracy.com. Of course, my name is Ra Castaldo. This is the Exploring the Ka YouTube channel, and you have just dived into the sound of the light on the Space Water podcast. This is episode number 62. Gary is a longtime guest and friend and colleague of the show. And you can find Gary, like I said, at Genesis6Conspiracy.com. He's got two books in the Genesis 6 Conspiracy series. Here's one of them. Here's the original Genesis 6 Conspiracy book. For those of you that maybe have not heard of Gary Wayne or new to my channel, um, you guys are in for a treat. I always say this because Gary Wayne is really not just a great guy and have spent a lifelong quest in knowledge, but he also is really one of the best researchers out there when it comes to the mysteries pertaining to the Bible. So everybody buckle up. It's always a great show with Gary Wayne. And once again, you could find him at Genesis6Conspiracy.com. His books are of the same name. Gary's right now in an undisclosed location in the Canadian wilderness, and he's only got audio on until the end of the summer, beginning of September. So we're gonna pull up his website when he's speaking, and of course you get to see my amazing face when I'm speaking. So Gary, it's a pleasure. I'm glad you came, and I consider it an honor when you spend these times with us because I know you're on your summer home in the undisclosed Canadian wilderness, and just for you to appear on the show during these times, it's really a pleasure. I appreciate it.
My pleasure to come back and be on your show and to what I like about the shows you do and why I always make time is that you talk about topics that other people don't want to tread on, don't know enough about to tread on, or too fearful to tread on. So it's good to get that information out, not to try and scare people or anything like that, but to give them a better understanding how this works and how the world works with these topics and how that should fit into their understanding of the world and their belief system, whatever that belief system is. But it's designed to help you make those choices. And so it's a pleasure to come on and talk about things that I think connect some dots and answers questions for people so that they can be a little bit more comfortable, where things are in this world, because it's a crazy world and crazier than most people think.
Yeah, that's for sure. I agree 100% in what you're saying. And over the years, I mean, guys, for those just tuning in for the first time, Gary and I have been literally doing shows pretty much on a monthly basis for 10 years. And it's been a pleasure, and we never run out of topics because this is a very pertinent these are very pertinent topics, and the times we're living on, it's never been more important. We're losing our past. And when you don't know who you are and where you came from, you don't know where you're going, in my opinion. And um, religions are a great thing for people, but sometimes they also can, misguide people and steer them off the wrong course. Because remember, it's only humans that are running these religions, and we only can evolve and get better with some of the things that we talk about and tend to, maybe sometimes misjudge people and get angry and do all these things. But I think it's really important for us to find common grounds, and talk about some of these topics because we're losing our history, we're losing who we are. And that's why you're a very special person to have as a guest, Gary, and one of the only people I have as a guest throughout the year. Today, Gary and I chose it was kind of last minute. We weren't sure whether we were going to do a podcast today. There was some technical difficulties and things like this. So we decided on talking about a very, very interesting topic that has to do with Enochian calls and humans basically communicating with the Grigori, the Watchers. And Gary, I know we've talked about this in different aspects over the years, but I think this is a very important topic to focus on for a whole show. And maybe we should just jump in if you want to give us a little breakdown of first of all, maybe should we give a background of who the Watchers and the Grigori are before we get into like John Dee and Edward Kelly and various people that might have broke the veil and communicated with these beings?
Yeah, I think it's always good to put a little bit of a platform down, set the stage, set the parameters on the conversation, because I think you're probably always getting new guests, so we don't want to, we don't want to lose them going into it. So if people aren't familiar with the term Grigori, that is the term that is used for what we understand as a watcher. And if people aren't familiar with the term watcher, that's a group of angels that are listed. And biblically, for Christians, if you're wondering why we're talking about Grigori, it goes back to Daniel 4 in terms of the watchers that come down and are talking about how the order of things work and how things are adorned in terms of the government and responsibilities and authorities. And these watchers are from the throne of God. So these are loyal watcher angels. But biblically and in polytheist religions, there's a rebellion that takes place that splits the angelic realm into groups of two, one led by Satan and one led by the God Most High in heaven. And so these watchers are part of the hierarchy at the top and are surrounding God, and they're made up of archangels. And a lot of people don't think archangels are watchers, but they're in the presence of God, so they have to be watchers. So the standard hierarchy that some of the church fathers put out isn't accurate because they put them down in the third level, not on the first level. So, and they only have three watchers, not four watchers. So, biblically speaking, we should be accurate and use the four. Archangels, the second group would be cherubim, the four-faced ones. Also, the seraphim, which are the six-winged, serpent-faced dragon angels, the ones that work before the altar of God and in charge of governance and religion as part of their hierarchy and their pillar of authority, and angels underneath them. And then you have one that's generally not listed unless you're familiar with the book of Enoch, and then you don't know where he gets it from because it's not translated properly, in my opinion, in the Bible. So we do get it biblically, but you have to go to the Hebrew on it, and that's the Ophanim, which are understood as the throne angels. So when you hear about the angelic realm in Christianity, they're talking about thrones and throne angels. You have no idea where that's coming from because you don't get the basis for it as you do with cherubim or seraphim or archangels. So we get that in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10. And that is in the chariot with the God. You have the cherubim up front. You have these wheels, these concentric wheels that are going round and round, and those wheels is Hebrew Gilgal. But there's two words for wheels. And the second word in Hebrew is ophan. So the wheels are labeled in Hebrew in those passages as Gilgal, as in Gilgal Raphaim, the concentric rings of circles at the foot of Mount Hermon, which was an ancient polytheist giant worship site. And then you have these beings that have four faces, but are different than the cherubim. And one face is of a cherubim, and then you have three faces that are also in there that are identical, but there's something distinct. And these are the Ophanim as they're listed, Ophan in Hebrew. So those are the four groups of watchers. So for the most part, if you look at the pantheon of gods and you see the imagery in ancient times, most of them are reptilian-like in sort of groups of reptilians, whether it's like a crocodile, like Sobek, for example, or it is a Uraeus god of the Middle East, like Baal or Osiris or El or Zeus or Anki or Enlil. These are all Uraeus gods with wings and serpent faces, and similar to the serpent gods of the Kishamaya, like Quetzalcoatl and all the associated ones throughout Central South America and into North America with a similar looks and applications. And there are also serpent gods, and they're called plume serpents and feathered uh, plume serpents and feathered serpents. And so they're the most predominant because of the ruling class, right? And the royal bloodlines and the right to reign come from them. And there are other kinds that of gods that can be looked at that come from the other watchers. But just to give a sense of who these individuals are, and there's loyal ones and disloyal ones, and depending on whether you're a polytheist or monotheist, uh, which ones you're going to look at as the good ones and which ones are the evil ones. So um, these are the ones that are used to translate into uh, Greek as Grigori, not just into the books of Enoch, but into the language, and also as Ra will point out and is an expert in is how it overflowed into the Etruscan language, into the Italian language. And there's a lot of crossover between Greek and those languages because, again, it's the same sort of pantheon. So these are the ones that brought the knowledge to the earth and permitted civilizations in most accounts. We don't get this biblically. We have a little bit different version of that knowledge coming down through the book of Enoch, but they're talking about the same set of events in prehistory and early post-Diluvian history, and that not all of these watcher angels who violated crimes went to the pit prison. So there was ones that would replace them. And so when we look at the host, as the angels are called, or the host of heaven, stars is the allegorical term for them. And each one would have one that's associated with them. So it may be a little bit more than allegory or not, but I speculate because I don't have scripture to substantiate with that. You have the Hebrew word Saba, which means an army of angels. And so now when you have rank and order, that goes back to the hierarchy I was talking about, that's talked about in Psalms 82 with the council of the gods and the 70 nations that they rule over. Yeah, both before and after the flood, as Deuteronomy 2:32 dictates, and 70 nations again after the flood, before the flood, and then into the future, all going to be represented. That's a show on itself, so I won't spend too much more on that. But these angels communicated and walked with us before the flood, early after the flood. And as time moves on, it seems that their ability to interact with us because of the violations against the laws of creation are restricted. Doesn't mean they're not there and ruling from the council of gods even to this day, because Satan is still the prince of this world for a short time longer and the god of this world. And he sits over his council of gods that's recorded in Psalms 82. So they're still in control. And when people are talking with watchers in the occult, when they're referring specifically to watchers, it would be to one of these angels and more likely either cherubim or seraphim, because cherubim has certain specific knowledge that they communicate in the occult to specific individuals worthy of that knowledge, and it's a special knowledge compared to the other knowledge that the seraphim would provide.
Yeah, incredible, incredible information there, Gary. Yeah, and I thank you for the kind words you said about me. It means a lot coming from you. You of all people, it means a lot. For those that even are wondering too sometimes, and thank you guys for the love in the chat room. Um, People might be wondering even my name Ra. That's an acronym. My I have a very Italian name, Raffaele Antonio Castaldo. You know, Ralph Anthony in English is Raphael. So it kind of fit with the RA. It's sort of an acronym, and I was in a band for a long time, and it was sort of like a stage and pen name that I use. So if people are uncomfortable with saying the name Ra, they could call me Ralph or Raffaele or Ralphie, whatever you're comfortable with. So Gary, an amazing information there. This is an important topic because on so many different categories, and for people that see this is Gary's website up that we have. Um, Gary mentioned the word Uraeus. You can see the Uraeus is right there on either side, basically of the pyramid and the circle right there. Um, it's the solar asp, also looked at in Egyptian. This is an important symbol, and the communication with these watchers or Grigori. Well, was it in Enoch too, Gary, when Grigori was actually first used?
Yeah, yeah. And as you know, as Enoch is being translated into the Greek traditions, they're looking for words that better fit what they're looking for. I'm not sure why they didn't go with Dracont or Draconta, but you know, Grigori, or as I think there's in the original, it's S and then Grigori. And I haven't researched what the meaning is with the prefix on that, but Grigori is the short form.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe that the name Gregory comes from Grigori.
Hmm. Interesting. Wow, that's it.
and
Very interesting.
yeah, and I'm not saying there's anything evil in that, but I'm just saying that that's where a lot of people will say, "Hey, that's just referring to an angelic name." And I
Yeah,
used
and
to think,
look
"Oh,
at that.
I wonder what that means."
Yeah. And then look at that guy from the old Russian shaman from his name was literally Grigori Rasputin.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just can't make this up.
Yeah,
It's
you
just
can't.
crazy
Well,
how these
before be,
things are used throughout our society in plain sight, and nobody
yeah.
recognizes what's going on.
Well, I think it's very important that we have certain bits of information that give us clues, even in
Yeah,
the Bible, with
yeah,
these
yeah,
watchers as well being, sort of imprisoned, some of them, and all of this, because I think this is how they started maybe to communicate with us telepathically and invade us in certain ways, where even maybe possibly from a prison, some sort of prison that they're invading our thoughts in our dream time.
yeah.
Right. And
Well, and that may be possible. And I was just going to
yeah, I'm
touch on
speculating
there.
with that, of course, but I
Well,
think it's possible.
well, I used to think that it was just the ones that were still free to do so, and you would think the pit prison would create a barrier to prevent any communication, but maybe not. And the reason I say that is in Ezekiel 32. And I do go back to Ezekiel 32 a lot when I'm trying to explain things, because it answers so many questions. And it's one of those just terrific, what I call dual prophecies, where it gives you extraordinary information from prehistory. It's relative to the prophet of the time, and it has end time implications. And in Ezekiel 32, you have the pit prison, and you have the terrible ones, and you have a terrible one Probably Pharaoh Necho, based on the dating of Ezekiel's prophecy, and in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, who is the terrible of nations. So there's a hierarchy of terrible ones who's about to befall him, and the terrible ones are a team, as they're known in Hebrew, um, are ones who did horrible things on this earth as giants, as descendants of the Watchers, offspring of the Watchers, and were slain, and they were sent to the pit prison. And so these terrible ones are speaking to Pharaoh from the pit prison, which you wouldn't think possible. But here we have this whole chapter on this discussion that's going on and the different types of terrible ones that are in the pit prison. And these are the mighty ones, as they're described, which is in Hebrew, Gibor, Giborim, not always used to describe a giant, but most often, even though it's used 150, I think, 5 times in the Old Testament as the word Gibor and Giborim. Not everyone is used for a giant. It can mean just strength. It can mean a noble individual. It can mean a number of different things and is used in those ways. But beyond where you have a translation where it says mighty ones, because it is likely referring to the giants, and not always. You got to be careful with it, um, and make sure the context is there to make your conclusion. And so if the demigods have the power to do that with another demigod ruler, do they have the ability to do that with certain individuals of the bloodline? That's one possibility. But even more and more directly is angels that are put into that pit prison would be more powerful. So they may not even need that sort of bloodline or genealogical connection. But maybe they do it with selected ones, right? Ones that are more worthy within the bloodline or have earned that through rising up to the highest levels in mysticism. And so, and how I get there is it's the terrible ones that are in the sides of the pit prison. And then you also have in there as well, and we're not told whether they're in similar cells on the sides or they're in the middle. Um, as I look at more of the passages, it's almost like they have a separate container in the middle, and then you have these cells for all of these terrible ones around it. But I'm speculating to a certain degree because getting firm on that has been a little bit difficult. But it's the word mighty that are also speaking with um, the not mighty, the word strong there. Um, in Ezekiel 30 that are speaking with Pharaoh. And strong doesn't go back to Gibor. It goes back to El, E-L, for an angel or a god. And so it seems now you have angels speaking also to Pharaoh Necho at this time, which now opens up the door to um, others being able to speak with angels within the pit prison themselves. How it's done, I don't know. I just know I can't not recognize a passage that says whether it's certain circumstances that are required or not, there is a capability for some communication with some individuals out of the pit prison. And one other thing is I was just thinking of with Gregory and Grigori, we also have the modern calendar as the Gregorian calendar, which is the solar calendar and the change from the lunar calendar. And if that doesn't send some chills up your spine in terms of, okay, um, who are these the ones that had our calendars changed?
Yeah, that's crazy. And also we have the Gregorian chants, right? Right, and
Yes.
they use
And
that
why
right in
would you be
church.
doing, yeah, and why would you be doing chants with that sort of name, with the understanding of the title that goes with it, if you're a monotheist? If you're a polytheist, I think it makes perfect sense, because that's just part of your ritual process is chants and vibrations and communication with the other world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I even talk about in the book that I'm writing that it's a possibility that this prison is a prison of light. I mean, these are light beings. It's talked about that yes, they can get denser and push themselves into matter and even veil themselves as humans and come into this realm, but they're a higher form of matter than us. So it's possible that they are, what we call in science as some sort of plasma species, and maybe there's a light prison uh, outside of Earth. An underworld could be below Earth. It could be around Earth. So maybe it could be a light prison that exists somewhere in our magnetosphere. Maybe even always on the night side, rotating, and they're always in darkness, always on the night side of the
Yeah,
magnetosphere in some sort of light prison.
yeah,
And I speculate on things like that because I've found some supporting evidence in mythology and science. Because Gary, it's pretty advanced knowledge that if you really get into some of the mysticism, and for those that don't, I consider myself basically a Christian mystic. I was brought up in Roman Catholicism and mysticism and Christianity all merged pretty much together. And I've witnessed and seen myself and have read some deep knowledge associated with the Watchers that's been passed down through Italian mysticism. And they claim to have got the knowledge from the Persians. And the Persians claim to get the knowledge from a mysterious sun people or star people, right? So, I mean, this is specific knowledge where these Watchers they guard all the dimensional planes. You can't draw a magic circle or light a ritual incense without these beings being around and you having to communicate in some way. And the knowledge that they have is you do basically certain gestures at certain ends of the circle. And these ends are considered watchtowers, and each watchtower is connected to a different region of the stars. I mean, they had the star Aldebaran as being marking the vernal equinox. It held the sacred position into them as the watcher of the east, right? And then they had all those four royal stars that we see in Persian, Gary, is the four watchtowers of the Grigori in Italian mysticism, and I think possibly even the Enochian calls with John Dee and Edward Kelly that we'll get into.
yeah. And for people again not real familiar with how the invisible um, forces work, both good and evil, and from a monotheist perspective that I come from, um, the loyal angels of the God Most High are the good ones, and the ones who rebelled are the evil ones that follow Satan. But just to get that biases on the table. But when we look at those four stars, that's like representing four sides of the throne of God. And that we also need to understand that Satan and polytheism, and they would look at it from the flip side, but from the monotheist perspective, again, is that the polytheism counterfeits everything in monotheism. So Satan has his own throne room. The seven wandering stars have their own throne room. But you get this interesting four number that also pops up, and that would tend to represent four sides around the throne, whether of Satan or whether of God. And typically those are four archangels in the Bible. And they would be, we're only provided two names biblically, although we also get Raphael and Uriel in the KJV Apocrypha. So they may be part of the other two. And it lines up with four that are isolated as well in the book of Enoch and First Enoch. And so where that sort of fits where I'm going with it, understand star is an angel, as we talked about um, previously, and that they are created in the Quran out of the smokeless fire into something unique that only God could um, destroy. So there's, and again, I know that's not biblical, but we're not told how this unique spiritual creature is a bad word, being was created. We just know that they were, and they are a very powerful, immortal from the creation being. And so we would understand in the book of Enoch that these are the four presences, which is a very odd term. A presence, as in a spirit, which is one way of translating ruach. And we don't have the original Hebrew, so I can't confirm that that's the word, but it seems to be, just as angels are part of the different kinds of spirits that are out there as they're defined in Hebrew and with pneuma in the Greek. And biblically, we have the four winds of prophecy, the ones that are described in Zechariah 6 that go around and are sent out from the presence of God. Notice the similarity in the terms that from what Enoch is using. And they permit significant events of prophecy to begin. We would also see this as being manifested in Daniel 7 and 8, where you have the four winds of prophecy stirring up the beast empires. The beast empires are always intimately connected with Israel from a biblical perspective. And that word wind goes back to the Hebrew word ruach. So it can mean wind, but spirits, stars, and angels are also referred to as wind as part of the allegory, but it's the key word
Wow.
going back to Hebrew here that is important. And in Zechariah 6, these are the four spirits that come from the presence of God. So you start to see this connection. And then when you understand that these are also the four winds that are going to gather Israel in the last 3.5 years of this age, the four winds are also of prophecy will begin the end time. These are the four riders with their horses that come from the throne um, in Revelation 6. And a lot of people think these are demons, but demons don't come from the throne of God. Some people think the first rider is Antichrist. Antichrist doesn't come from the presence of God. That, that's nonsense. You have to, you have to make sense of the details, even though you can do, if you don't, you can do interesting speculation, but it won't stand up to what it says in the scripture. And the riders are referred to with a pronoun as him, and that's otra or autos, which has a root word of that means a baffling wind for its source word. And so again, it's difficult to get direct translations from the written meanings from the New Testament as
This
they
is
come out of
incredible.
Greek to Hebrew, but you can look for cognate terms, right?
It's incredible,
But you
Gary,
have
because
to
that's such deep knowledge. It really is, because I actually think suns and stars, like we said, these are a representation of angels, an advanced intelligence, and the winds would be the stellar winds, the solar winds coming from them, and all the information that's coming from within the stellar wind. I mean, it's incredible. It's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. And we know, as you mentioned, that angels are assigned various authorities um, around the world, around the physical universe, around different dimensions. And so they would control that with winds or spirits. And depending on what the application is there, how you would want to apply that.
That is incredible. That is incredible. It's like they had advanced knowledges of the sciences that we couldn't even think about, or we're just starting to dip our toe in now. and
Yeah, yeah.
and the spiritual significance of it to the domain of humans, and the spiritual domain of humanity. It's really incredible how and it's dangerous, right? And these are talked about as being in Italian mysticism as being also the Grigori as gods of the four winds, the like the Greeks, the
There you
Greeks
go.
kind of, yeah, and they have their
So,
four main watchtowers.
yeah, yeah. So if you have four winds that come from the presence of God and may head up the four categories of of orders of angels, then you would have that also on the polytheist side.
Yeah, I mean, they look at the Grigori in like Italian witchcraft, Italian mysticism, however you want to. They are the guardians, the four main ones, the four watchers, the four ones that stand over the north, the south, the east, and the west watchtowers. They're the four entrances to the realms of Aster, the realms of the stars. So, like
Yep.
if you want to access information from the sun and the star through a ritualistic practice, this is the beings that you have to negotiate with for that knowledge. And that, it's very dangerous, very dangerous. You should be able to acquire knowledge from within, right? From through prayer, your connection thing. You should never have to use a middleman, in my opinion. Middlemans are always shady, no matter what you're dealing with. There's usually in the middleman, it's not good. So when you're
Well,
using
yep.
a middleman,
But so yeah, if you need a middleman, that means you're probably looking for illicit.
yeah,
It's kind of like, right? It's kind of
yeah,
like when people are buying on the black market, and you're using
yeah,
that as a conduit to it, where you could just go buy, get things, whatever is legal, you can
yeah.
get that openly, right? So it's the same sort of concept. So yeah, you don't, just as you don't need an intercessor, um, to pray to God um, for you. Because and we're instructed to do that directly. I mean, I certainly insert my Redeemer's name that I pray through as well. But um, you shouldn't have to have special access through crazy ways to get knowledge. If that knowledge is meant for us at this time, then you can pray to God and it will come to you. But make sure you've tested the spirit, that that spirit comes from God, that it isn't deceiving you to lure you into the illicit knowledge you're not to have. And even, there are so many Christians that say, well, I received knowledge from the Holy Spirit about this. And my point to them is well, I hope that's well and true, and you'd be very blessed. But the Holy Spirit would not contradict what Jesus said or what was written in the Bible, because it's the Holy Spirit is in perfect harmony. So you need to test the spirits. That's is my point.
I agree 100%. And these watchtowers that we're speaking of, I mean, this is exactly what John Dee and Edward Kelly were were working with and doing. I mean, look at this is from the British Museum right here of Edward Kelly's vision of the gold disc that he was supposed to that he engraved. Look, these are the four watchtowers that we're just discussing right here,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty.
Well,
Either he
well,
got that
and,
right out of,
and,
or he was spoken to make that.
yeah, and if you look on a Masonic temple, in their windows, they have these nice little square windows with generally these white little frames, and it's in with that cross separating the four quadrants, right? And when you look at how they use the legal authority, and it's all about legalism in the oath-based societies of polytheism and masonry and Gnostics and things like that, they generally have their Masonic halls within the original town square, number one. Number two is they lay out the town square, which is their term, for their legal basis, and they use it in that cross manner. And typically, they're going to have um, legal operations at the north and south axis. And then they're going to use two churches that they control on the east and west axis. And typically it is the uh, the Catholic one on the left, but it doesn't have to be, and it's the Protestant one on the east. And that's usually marking the town square. And then they do their tunnels underneath and can do all sorts of rituals and things and continue to do so underneath the groundworks. And I was shown this a few years ago, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I thought, well, I'll check out my own hometown. And sure enough, that's exactly as it's laid out. And anywhere, if you can get to the original town site and the town square, look for those markings because they put their legal presence on that. Now, that's just one application to what's on that occult symbol that's in there. You've got the wheel, you've got the gold, and as you dig deeper into everything, I don't expect people to know all of the imagery, and certainly I don't, but everything means something in terms of their control in this world.
Yeah, for sure, Gary. And I'm gonna show you something real quick from my YouTube here. Um, if I can get into it. Yeah, here it is. This was from a Masonic temple. I used to live a little bit north of where I live now. Uh,
Yep.
so this was in a town a little bit north of here. Let me see if I could go to it. This was from a Masonic temple of, are they gonna let me view it though? All right, hold on.
So, and what's interesting with John Dee, while you're bringing that up, is he was probably the greatest mystic of his time, Rosicrucian adept. And he had a handle because he would do spy work for Queen Elizabeth the first, and it was 007.
Wow, yeah,
So,
yeah. He was the first one to come up with that, right?
yeah, so spying for the realm, and then you have this whole mythos written around 007 with James Bond. Um, None of that is coincidence. We live in their imagery and allegory, and most people have no idea what's really going on. So you wonder whether or not what they're saying with that allegories is are the MI6 and MI5 of England, are they not only spies but also
Yeah,
mystics and
for sure.
Rosicrucians?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, for sure. So
Because
this
when
was
you consider the CIA being set up by Illuminati type individuals, uh, like the Bushes and
yep,
others, um, it's just too much of a coincidence.
too much of a coincidence. So this was in Middletown, New York. This is the Masonic temple you could see, and I felt a weird vibe when I was looking at it. This was from man, what this might have been from 2010, 2010 this happened. And
Yeah,
I recently found the picture again. So I was getting a
yeah,
weird vibe when I was standing in front of the Masonic temple. I was waiting to get food across the way, and I was looking at the Masonic temple because I was gonna take pictures of like the symbolism on there and stuff like that. And then I started getting a weird vibe. So I snapped a picture, and then later on when I went home, I made sure I like enlarged the picture, and I scanned all over it. And then look at in the left corner here, this face. You see
yeah,
that? It looks like a ghostly face with black eyes and everything just pushing against the window looking out.
yep,
It's pretty scary.
yeah. Yeah, whatever that is something that they're either A, it's trying to escape,
Yeah,
or
that's how it
it's
looked like,
yeah, or something that's being projected out. It's hard to
right?
know, but
And I mean,
there's probably some sort of dark ritual going on at that time.
yeah, you know what? I know we look for patterns and faces and things, but
Yeah.
this is a little bit different. I mean, it there's expressions. You can see the thing is like looks trapped and in despair. Really incredible. You know, it freaked me out when I caught that on video
Yeah.
and for me to see that, you know, who the average person is not going to be looking at something like that. You know, so it was like for me to find somehow, you know. But yeah, so let's get into a little bit of John Dee and Edward Kelly and some of this communication and also there might be similarity. Have you ever heard of the Voynich manuscript?
I've heard of it. I can't say that I've read it or researched it, but
For those that
I am aware of it.
yeah, for those that never heard of it, this is the one of the books that they have of the Voynich manuscript, and this one actually is a good one because they have the reprint of all the pages in color of the Voynich manuscript in here. And some of it is I mean, it's in a language that no one can decipher, not even artificial intelligence. And some of them is very interesting with organic looking stars and all sorts of interesting stuff in here. And some of it looks like women in ancient Hebrew communal baths or something, naked women in communal baths. There's like a lot of interesting, and it seems like the art was done first, and then the writing is on top of it. And no one can decipher what the writing is, but some of it looks similar to
So,
Enochian writing.
okay, that's the connection that you're making there. So,
Yeah,
yeah, and if we look at what Enochian writing is, it's again a bit of a mystery outside polytheism. Certainly within polytheism, they have a pretty firm belief of what it is. What I've been able to piece together is Enoch is the one who creates language and writing before the flood. And we're not talking Enoch, son of Jared here. We're talking
like
Enoch,
Thoth.
yeah, Enoch,
Yeah,
son of Cain, who, as in third Enoch, is said to evolve into a godlike character, just as Thoth does. That's how you sort of kind of get there. Um, and it's kind of like Mercury. They are accepted amongst the pantheon, but they got there in a unique way. And so when we look at Enochian writings, we look at that as basically sacred writings. And we see that show up in um, Egyptian language as hieroglyphs, sacred writing. And so I'm not saying Enoch created the hieroglyphs. He seems to be more associated with cuneiform. But the hieroglyphs may be a spin-off of the cuneiform. Um, and and uh, and so the writings that Enoch is putting down is the language that was being spoken by those who rule the world at that time. And typically at that time, early on, you have, from a biblical perspective, but from a polytheist, there are more civilizations than one. But biblically, we have the Seth line and the Canaanite line. But there's a merging with uh, those who actually rule this world once you get the creation of the giants. So it's hard to know exactly when Enoch, son of Cain, creates this writing to hold all of this knowledge of the seven sacred sciences that are merging. Probably that's when it's going to be merged because of this additional illicit knowledge. So he's going to create writing so it doesn't get lost. And that's why it's these sacred writings, it's sacred language. And we would understand that for the most part as Indo Aryan, but as a distinct language from what the Basques have that would also be antediluvian. And who knows, there may even be another few languages that were created as well. But the one we have the most of is Indo-Aryan. And what's interesting is that the language that is attributed to the disembodied spirits of the giants is called gibberish, um, and it was spoken very quickly and in unknown languages and or mumbles. So there's different tones and vibrations and chants that go with the language of this
Yeah.
that would fit the polytheist side. And of course, Gibber is the short version of gibberish as gibber or gibbor, which is how we would pronounce mighty one as Gibor, a Gibborim, which is used to describe giants. So you have this connection. And Gibor is the first, or gibberish is the first word to follow giant in the Webster's dictionary. And again, I do
Oh,
not believe in these
crazy.
types of coincidences.
Yeah.
And this is the cuneiform language that comes down as we see after the flood as well. So it's both before then after, and it goes throughout the Middle East, right into Syria and Anatolia and Sumeria. So it's widely used through different groups of Indo-Aryan groups. And so it is a language that had multiple dialects to it. But we do have a commonality that has been assembled that people will know as pi. When you're using etymology, that's Proto-Indo-European. And those words are very valuable to understand the English language in many cases and the history and the fuller meanings to what they're talking about.
Yeah, I was just answering the chat room. So the chat room, Gary, I agree too. I agree with what you're saying with and those basically are the basis. Those chants you're discussing is the basics of a lot of witchcraft, especially that comes out of Italy, and Etruscan and Mediterranean. I mean, they would be these tonal, metered, guttural chants, and they would open up vibrational energies in nature and their universe, and they're very 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 crazy, some of the stuff that you guys that's in the past, and this comes right out of Sanskrit, and it comes out of a lot of the mantras to the and hymns to the sun and to the stars, and apparently in these writings this is how they guided the soul on its journey through the cosmic waters, right? And what's interesting, and I think information that wasn't intended for us. It's not meant for humans, and it was only given to the pharaohs and the sun kings and the solar kings. I don't think we were ever meant to even see a lot of these walls and murals that are on these walls. They weren't meant for us. They were meant for, the solar dynasties, and they were hidden. They weren't meant for us to, but a lot of these writings, they're guiding the soul in the afterlife to a specific region in the cosmic waters, and they talk about it in the Orpheus writings. The Orpheus, there was a cult of Orpheus that Gary and I have touched on when we did a show about the Thracians and ancient Bulgaria, and they were a cult based on the transmigration of souls and the afterlife. And they literally had hymns and poetic verses that were giving instructions to the afterlife, where to go even. And I've been trying to translate some of these, and I feel like there's advanced knowledge in it, Gary. There's one of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the golden plate of Pettalia. Um,
No.
these were specific gold gold scrolls, tiny little gold scrolls. Let me stop sharing for a second. Oh, I wasn't sharing anyway. All right. So they were I thought I was sharing screen right now. They were tiny little gold scrolls, right? And let me show you what some of these look like. And they had little, this is not in color, but that was in here. This is all made of gold, and there was a gold scroll in here. The chain was made later on in Roman times. There were several of these made. You can find
Wow.
them. Yeah, you can find them in the British Museum, one of them, right? So check what these say on them, Gary. This golden plate of Petalea. There's a few of them. They were giving instructions of where the soul is going to travel, and it says
No.
right? And the Orpheus, this was cult of Orpheus. And Petalia, check this out. Doesn't it sound very similar to Patala, the other world of
Yeah.
Hindu? Petalia,
Yep.
right? And there's a town that is associated with Mount Stella, the mountain of the stars. It was a Greek colony down in Sicily, in Italy. And this
Yeah.
was found in the fourth century BC, from where it's from, the golden plate of Petalia. And it was telling uh the the traveler, the soul traveler in the afterlife to go towards the the northern circumpolar stars, very similar to Pharaoh Unas in the pyramid texts. They tell him to go the same. So they're telling him to go to the North Pole and travel where he's got to drink from this cool spring of waters. And it says, drink from lake's memory, the cool spring of waters, and say that you're a child of the starry heavens and the earth. Right? So what I found is that if a light body, if when you're now a soul, and for a short period of time, maybe even, you're a light body, a being of light, you're transforming into a soul, right? And you're traveling outside of Earth into maybe the magnetosphere area, those waters. And if you go, they're literally telling him go to the left and drink to the cool spring of Lake's memory in these writings. Now, if you go to the left into the night side, when you're outside of Earth, right? If you go to the night side, and there's a cool stream of ions in the magnetopause. And this is like stuff that's coming right from the sun, in particles that are coming right from the sun and come in through the magnetosphere. And there's like a whirling vortex in there of cool stream of ions. I literally think that because they're telling the pharaohs and the sun kings to do this in Egypt too. They're telling them the pharaoh to travel into the cosmic waters and transform, right? I think they're actually gathering particles from the solar winds and transforming into something more than a human, something eternal, immortal, like a god, even, something like that. A lesser god, of course,
Well,
not like,
that's what, yeah,
go
they're
ahead.
that's what they were trying to do,
Yeah.
is to become like their parents, and to live amongst their parents, and that if they learned enough knowledge, they would have the ability, not necessarily during their life. That would be, I don't know whether that was knowledge that was available to them to transform while they were still alive, but certainly they needed the knowledge to avoid going to the pit prison or wandering the earth as um, a a demonic spirit, a disembodied spirit. They needed the knowledge to, as in the Egyptian analogy, to get on that boat and go down that water to the other world, to be in their heaven with their gods, which is typically in Hades or Sheol and all the other
Yes.
different names for the other world. Just
Yes.
as you have the same pattern with different allegories all around the world with the royals, who were the highest level of adepts because they're the divine representatives of their celestial mafia godfathers. And so, let's say in the Ugaritic text for Christians out there, because it has uh, the root language for Hebrew with ancient Semitic, and you have the Baalim Council of the gods after the flood, and some references to the Council of the Gods before the flood with El, that they would come up from, and Baal would come up from Hades every day, or Sheol, the other world, and pass through the portal at Mount Hermon is known as the gate to Hades to oversee his realm, both his realm that he controlled as the chief god uh, in the physical world and in the underworld where he reigned. So if you are now one of these royals and you're trying to become like a god, you need to get to that heaven and then have something manufactured, for lack of a better word and not being polytheist, um, to be created like a star. And again, sticking with the consistency of the so in the Ugaritic text, they would all of the Raphaim giants from the Council of Giants, the Assembly of the Detanu, also at Mount Hermon, Mount Saphon, as it was originally called in the Ugaritic text, Sion, Sirion, Sinir, different names for Hermon before it's named after the oath that was taken there, Haram Anathema, Haram. The giants who are still living, they would parade the king that died into the other world to ensure that they got there. So it's just a different way, but you have the Viking boats that were designed to do the same thing. Put them on a boat, put them on the water to do the imagery, but to get them there in the same sort of manner. So now going back and linking it with the Egyptian pantheon, Osiris, for example, um, was raised up to be a star in Orion. And that sort of completes that process that they're trying to do to become a star, to become a god like, let's say, Thoth, who was elevated to that level, who was, originally likely Enoch of the lineage of Cain in the Old Testament. So it's when we look at all the different vernacular rituals around the world of this, they're all doing the same thing. It's the same pantheon of gods, it's the same original religion, and they're using just variations of the allegories to try and accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, I totally agree, Gary, and it's it's incredible all the allegories out there when you really get into it, and it's so much more advanced than originally with like people like Sir Wallace Budge who first started doing like Egyptian translations. They thought these were all primitive writings and all of this. It's way more. It's nothing primitive about it. It's primitive the way that we're
Or,
translating it.
or, but they were obsessed with it. So
Yeah.
they either didn't have the knowledge, as we're led to believe, as seculars,
Yeah.
and so said, and just did this as a way of
That's interesting.
disinformation to keep
Yeah.
what is really being translated because
That's
they want this information,
That's a
right?
possibility as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that because they were part of the elite, the Lites,
Yeah.
from a
Wow.
genealogical from a
Wow. That's the
genealogical
first time I've
base and
heard
descent.
that.
Yeah, I would say Aleem, but they're all intermarried with enough humans that they're not purebred to be Aleem, so elites, and that's their term. And if you look up the definitions in Webster, it's absolutely crazy. It's for the nobility and understanding the Indo-Aryans are the noble ones. These are the giants. I mean, we just live in their language. So, but anyways, they were probably more interested in it for their own religious understanding that they do know about. They just don't want us to know what the true meanings to these secrets are, because these are the inner secrets that aren't permitted amongst the mundane. And anybody who would leak that would suffer death. And if they're an upper adept, the punishment would probably be applied. So uh, we get information only. only as they want it to come out, and it's always controlled and it's always manipulated. And they put out a lot of misinformation on things so that you never know what's really going on. So, but it's just part of the control factor that's in place.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And Gary, this is I hate to use Wikipedia, but I can't show you guys. I have a book. I have a book on these artifacts that I was reading from. I showed you guys the picture of it from the book, but it really doesn't do it justice. This is actually the golden plate of Petulia, right? So this is the little scroll, only a
Yep.
few inches that the Greek
Yep.
writing is on, and this Roman chain was added later. But they found this little golden scroll in with the body where it was discovered. It
Yep.
was instructions of the
Yeah.
afterlife, right? So,
So, so
and look
here's
what it says,
interesting
Gary.
on
Like
that,
right from what you were saying, Gary, look what it says. You didn't even know about
I
this.
can't read it.
Oh, it says you will. Oh,
No.
let me share it. Am I not sharing? Oh, I am sharing screen. You guys can see. So it says you will
Yeah,
find
but
us.
it's too,
Yeah, it's too small for you. You will. It says you will find a
yeah,
spring on your left in Hades halls, and by it the cypress with its luminous sheen. Do not go near this spring or drink its water. You will find another, cold water, flowing from memory's lake. The guardians stand before it. Say, I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but descended from heaven. You yourselves know this. I am parched with thirst and dying. Quickly give me the cool water flowing from memory's lake, as they will give you the water from the sacred spring, and you will join the heroes at their rites. This is the memory on the point of death. Write this, the darkness folding you within it. Now, I do believe that darkness is on the night side of the magnetosphere where this cold stream of ions exists. If you guys look into plasma physics, on the magnetosphere, there's the magnetopause, and there's a cold stream of ions that exists, and it stretches out on the night side. This is the exact region I think they're discussing in this, and it's incredible and it's groundbreaking. I speculate about this in my book for those that are interesting. It should be coming out by the end of this year. But Gary, what's your opinion after hearing this, seeing this for the first time? They're talking about Hades halls. They're not talking about anywhere on Earth. They're talking
yeah,
about outside of Earth.
yeah. It's well, I don't find it surprising. Um, it's just more information on the consistency of that belief system that's out there, um, uh, from ancient times, and that is carried on to this day with those who rule this world. So, yeah, it's if people haven't seen that before, it'll give you cognitive dissonance for sure. Um, but it's just part of understanding how this world works, and we need to know that so we know how to make our decisions as to what we want to believe. And I would, look at all of this stuff and try and encourage people to look from into the monotheist side versus the polytheist side. But we need to understand for a while this is the world that we still live in, and it exists in its hierarchy today. And what I found also interesting is the picture that was showed there, how it was displayed. This is uh, used in so many different ways. And you started off with the show showing the Uraeus imagery. This is similar to that. Uh, and all of their imagery has multiple meanings. So with that Uraeus imagery, it was with the two serpents on the side. And sometimes they'll just show the serpent's wings in the imagery. Sometimes they'll show the bull horns, right? And those horns
Yeah,
are being represented with that necklace or the wings as it goes up. And now that special knowledge of how to become like a god is put up in the middle, like the sun disk. So
yeah,
that horn, two horns, and sun disk again is a constant imagery within multiple cultures and meaning similar types of different things. And so now in that one that you've got on display up there from my website, you've got the sun disk in there versus the knowledge, and understand the sun light is allegory for knowledge in polytheism. So it's just they're able to display a lot of different things in uh, in what I would call a taciturn language that they can break down into parts and almost to again put a sign of authority on things and to hide things in plain sight. But they'll use that imagery of the sun disk and the horns in a number of different ways. So keep an eye on in terms of its extended types of imagery that they're going to use, because when they do the smaller versions of the breakdown, you get into the deeper part of who these gods actually are. And then you can make connections biblically and affirm, are these angels you should be talking to or not? And the thing is where it crosses the line is you don't worship angels, period. And I hear a lot from some people who are struggling with it, like with the Essenes that worshipped angels. They say, well, they're good angels. I said, they provided illicit knowledge. And the Essenes are guardians of the illicit knowledge, and they're worshiping them. And you know, if you had to have an angel visit you and you see it in all of its angelic imagery, you may want to fall down and worship it. They'll tell you, if they're a loyal angel, they'll tell you not to do that. But the fallen angels want that worship. So that's why you need to distinguish things.
Yeah. Now you're making me really question all the Archangel Michael stuff that people believe in with Christianity, right? And I myself even have a
Well,
poster of Archangel
yeah.
Michael and things like that. It's not that I worship him, but uh it's really questioning. You make me question things sometimes, Gary. That's why I love having you on.
Well, it's to understand why you believe what you believe, and nobody can force a belief system on people. So I just try and provide information, and people need to make their own choices.
Well, you're right too.
And
That
so,
Uraeus is worn like a pendant and used as a pendant in many ways.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
very interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out because not
Well,
many people know
eh,
that.
yeah, and also when you look at that, imagine that type of imagery on your forehead, for example, right? Now imagine that's not just a sun disk on there, but you have an eye on there. Now you're having the all-seeing eye, which is your lens into the other world where you're going to receive this special knowledge. And that imagery will now go 3D in the occult with a single horn, as in a unicorn. And a unicorn would be represented as cherubim um, biblically. And those are ones that would supply special knowledge through that eye or that horn. They're, they're the same meaning, just different taciturn language.
Really cool. And well, do you think it's bad to have like to pray to Archangel Michael or say the Archangel Michael prayer? Because I
Yes.
you think it is?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Wow,
Absolutely.
because
That it would
they used to use it right in
it might.
church when I was like, I don't think they use it anymore. Actually, they took.
I know. I know. You should not invoke any angels' names, and I think it's one of the reasons why um, we're not provided many names, because
Wow.
it creates a religious cult on its own, and it leads you to worship um, uh, the angel and not the God Most High. So,
That's true.
yeah,
That's
it's
100%
not
true.
permitted.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I'm referencing this book right here. This is the complete Enochian dictionary right here. When I say this, they have when Kelly was first started as a medium. with these Enochian, the first recorded occasion he was granted a vision, he said, from Uriel. Now that before we close, I'm gonna let you go in a minute, Garrett, 'cause I know you have to go. Um, Before we go, that name Uriel. Now this is a name that we don't see in the Bible, right?
Not in the accepted canon. We
That's what I
do
mean.
have
Yeah.
it listed in the original KG Bible, but was in the Apocrypha section. So Uriel is provided there. But um, it, the trouble with the Apocrypha is it's not 100% verified in usually two ways. One is original author and original manuscript verification, so that you don't have um, any corruptions that are allowed in. So if and we lost a few over times, like the Book of Enoch. We don't have the original Hebrew manuscript or well, and those ones are not put into the Bible because we don't have that original manuscript to verify it.
Hmm.
So, but Uriel is mentioned as is Raphael in the KJV Apocrypha.
Yeah. And of course in the book of Enoch. Well, this was the angel that they said gave
Yes.
him, yeah, gave him the preliminary instructions for constructing the powerful magical talisman that they called the Sigillium Ameth or Emeth, and that looked like this, that Sigillium Ameth thing that the magical talisman that they made to communicate
Uh,
with.
yep.
Yeah. So
Well,
that it was said that Uriel was the one that was gave him that telepathic imprint pattern to make that. I found
yep.
that very interesting, because
Yes.
I mean,
So,
is that in veil saying, "Hey, I'm a good angel." It says in the book of Enoch, we're good angels. Like I'm one of the good guys. Is that like some sort of trickery, or is it really some sort of angelic being that we've heard about?
well, how I would sort of look at it is how does it fall into the rules of play
Yeah,
that we can sort of look at? So,
it doesn't.
angels, yeah, it doesn't. Angels, loyal and disloyal, um, will not do things beyond what they're permitted to do lest they receive their punishment. And so I'm talking about ones who have already um, are the rebellious ones. They're still not going to do things that are going to bring the punishment on for them sooner, which is always one of God's options for those individuals. And so they do not slander or counterfeit any other celestial beings. They may have similar names, like, for example, Baal has many names and titles. One of them is very close to Raphael, but it's has a different uh, association with it. So, and typically, there's a meaning to the name. So there's a title that sort of goes with it, but I don't want to get too deep into that where I'm going with it. So what the fallen angels do is they use their demigod offspring, the royals, the descendants of the giants, to slander celestial beings because angels know better, right? If they cross that line, they're going to get punished. So the fallen angels don't do that. So they use their offspring and their followers to do these things. So if you're in contact with uh, the angelic realm and you're dealing with a Uriel, chances are it's not the true Uriel if that's
Yeah,
one of the loyal angels. What it is a disembodied spirit of a giant, a demon who's counterfeiting that, who's saying he is
I
that
agree.
person, and they do it. They're beast spirits as we're taught in the Bible. They're brutish. They are the ones who slander celestial beings. They're the ones that do the things so the fallen angels don't get blood on their hands because they know how powerful God is. So likely when they're using names of angels, um, that would be associated with the loyal angels, expect that is a deceiving spirit, a seducing spirit, as we would understand it. Daemon spirit, as
Yeah.
you connect that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
devil spirit
incredible.
is seducing spirit, unclean spirit, evil spirit, daemon, Greek root word for demon.
Right. Yeah, this is where we get ultimately like the Devas and the Asuras, where all these names come from too. Really incredible.
Yeah.
Everybody, the one and only Gary Wayne, longtime colleague and guest and friend of the show. You guys can follow him at the website you see right here, Genesis6conspiracy.com, where you got two massive books in the Genesis 6 conspiracy series. You guys look how thick these are. Incredible book. Don't miss out. You can even get signed copies from Gary. Gary goes on pretty much everyone's podcast out there, but I hold ours special out of the podcast that he goes on. We have a very unique combination. Most shows Gary just goes on and teaches for the whole show. But we have a unique connection and we both have knowledge to share. And I think over the years I've learned to let Gary talk for most of the show and put my sense in when I can. And I've learned not to jump in and cut him off too much because I get excited when he talks. And I think I'm getting better at the overall of doing it the right way. And we've grown together on the show, and I'm really happy about the way everything is turning out, getting the knowledge out there. What I'm not happy about is the people's ignorance still out there, and people. We're here to unite, not to criticize, and not to get angry at people. So there's a lot of anger out there. We're all feeling it. There's a lot of frustrations. Um, Please try to really be good to each other and tune in to some of these topics and find who you are as a spiritual human and a being of God, because we're all God's creatures and it's never too late to change. Gary, I really appreciate you coming on my show. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you. I really consider our relationship through the podcast a special one, and I honor and cherish it. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. Hopefully, we connected a few more dots again for people, and people enjoyed the information that was provided. And always enjoy the conversation. Again, we get into things that um, should be a learning curve for most people if they're wanting to figure out how this world works, to help you make better decisions. So, hopefully, we gave you some new information today.
Yeah, I think we have. And I think a lot of this knowledge ended up becoming part of our media now and our our music scene, our media and movies, everything since humanity has been communicating with these otherworldly creatures. It's affected who we are as a species, and it's being broadcasted on a much larger
Yeah.
basis now. And I think that
Oh,
maybe
it
our
is.
next show, yeah, our next show,
Yep.
maybe we can explore
Yeah.
that.
Sure. It sounds like a good topic.
Yep. Like it's all over the media. It's all over everywhere. We're literally consuming it and giving it to our children every year. You go to buy cereal,
Yep.
you're buying poison and it has
Yeah.
leprechauns on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Those little mischievous elementals.
Yeah, right on the box. I mean, it's you got rainbows and
Right on the
leprechauns
box.
and poison.
Yeah.
Great.
And in Lucky
Yeah,
Charms.
yep. God, it's crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well,
Charm right in there.
yep,
You
yep.
couldn't have a
Oh,
more polytheist term with polytheist image with a mischievous agenda applied to it.
oh my God, incredible. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me, the one and only, the great Gary Wayne, Genesis6conspiracy.com. My name is Ra Castaldo. This is the Space Water Podcast, episode 62, the Enochian calls to the Grigori, as we spiral out.